Now to new developments tonight in the disappearance of Nancy Guthrie. Authorities are now focusing tonight on...
Investigators have narrowed their intense scrutiny down to two pivotal pieces of physical evidence, prominently featuring what they believe to be vital genetic material recovered from the heart of Nancy's residence. A hidden truth locked away inside the vehicle belonging to Nancy's son-in-law possesses the power to blow this entire investigation wide open. When federal agents meticulously dismantled the interior of that automobile, they were hunting for far more than mere smudged fingerprints or glaringly obvious clues. Their target was something infinitely smaller, invisible, microscopic fragments capable of answering the haunting question that has echoed since the moment Nancy vanished into thin air. Did an intimate member of her inner circle harbor a dark, unspoken secret? Or would the hidden contents of that car unequivocally exonerate the son-in-law, forcing detectives to pivot their desperate search elsewhere? Insiders report that the Federal Bureau of Investigation forensically dissected every inch of the automobile, combing through upholstery, the dark depths of the trunk, and shadowy crevices ordinary drivers completely ignore. In the bleak realm of criminal investigations, automobiles frequently transform into silent, unblinking witnesses to the macabre. They harbor invisible remnants of human existence. And whatever those federal agents unearth from the dark interior of that vehicle holds the power to trigger one of two absolute outcomes. It could instantly elevate Nancy's son-in-law to the chilling status of prime suspect, or permanently erase his name from the suspect's board. Let us delve into the psychological and forensic reasons why detectives are convinced this specific automobile harbors the ultimate truth. In confounding mysteries like the abrupt disappearance of Nancy Guthrie, law enforcement inevitably arrives at a critical juncture where the investigative lens pivots. The intense gaze shifts away from human beings and zeroes in on inanimate objects, cellular devices, discarded garments, and, quite frequently, motor vehicles. Automobiles glide silently through the hidden narrative of a crime, bridging geographical gaps and transporting those who hold the darkest secrets. Yet, occasionally they carry something else entirely, a silent passenger the driver is completely oblivious to, damning physical proof. This grim reality is precisely what drove investigators to turn their forensic spotlight upon the car owned by Nancy's son-in-law. Initially, the inspection appeared remarkably routine. Whenever an individual closely tethered to the victim becomes entwined in the murky timeline of a vanishing, detectives relentlessly scrutinize any artifact capable of corroborating their whereabouts. Establishing their exact actions is paramount, but automobiles possess a deeply unique, almost intimate significance in the hunt for truth. They are metallic vaults capable of harboring microscopic residues that linger stubbornly, long after a perpetrator is convinced their tracks have been flawlessly erased. We are speaking of phantom traces, stray clothing, fibers, microscopic specks of foreign soil or botanical matter, and minuscule droplets of biological material utterly invisible to the naked eye. Highly specialized forensic units know precisely where to hunt for these microscopic betrayals, buried deep within seat stitching, trapped beneath heavy floor mats, and concealed in the shadowy recesses of the trunk. They probe the forgotten, hidden corners where a piece of incriminating evidence might have been hastily shoved for a fleeting moment before being permanently discarded. As federal agents descended upon the son-in-law's automobile, they were not merely hunting for the bloody signature of a violent crime. They were seeking something equally profound: the absolute, undeniable proof that nothing sinister or out of the ordinary had ever crossed the threshold of those car doors. In deeply psychological puzzles like this one, the forensic harvest reaped from a car interior can violently throw an investigation down two drastically opposing paths. It can either cast a suffocating shroud of suspicion over a loved one, or quietly, methodically strike their name from the ever-narrowing list of potential suspects. That stark dichotomy is precisely why the meticulous teardown of this specific vehicle evolved into a make-or-break turning point in the hunt for Nancy. Whatever those federal technicians ultimately extracted from that metal shell possessed the raw power to resolve the single, burning question haunting detectives from day one. Was a trusted family member secretly pulling the strings of her demise? Or had the cloud of suspicion surrounding the son-in-law merely been a tragic, time-wasting mirage? When law enforcement processes a vehicle tethered to a high-stakes mystery, their methodology is nothing like the casual sweep most civilians might envision. They do not simply swing the doors open and casually glance under the seats. A true forensic autopsy of an automobile is agonizingly slow, deeply methodical, and painstakingly granular. Crime scene specialists commence by fiercely documenting every isolated quadrant. Thousands of photographs capture every conceivable angle, the precise geometry of the seats, the tilt of the rearview mirror, and the placement of mundane personal artifacts are frozen in time, exactly as abandoned. Even the most seemingly insignificant speck of debris left in the cabin holds the potential to become the linchpin of a murder trial months down the road. Once the staging is preserved, the true scientific unearthing begins. Technicians deploy alternating light sources to illuminate hidden biological nightmares that remain utterly invisible beneath normal sunlight. They are on the prowl for wiped-away blood spatter, bodily fluids, stray textile fibers, and microscopic grains of foreign dirt tracked inside on the sole of a killer's shoe. Every single one of these ghostly remnants acts as a puzzle piece, empowering detectives to forensically reconstruct the exact path the vehicle carved through the night. They can scientifically pinpoint its clandestine destinations and identify exactly whose breathing bodies occupied those seats. Their ultimate goal is to decipher if an unspeakable act took place within those walls during the dark, unaccounted hours investigators are desperately trying to map. In the chilling mystery of Nancy Guthrie's vanishing, the son-in-law's ride became an obsession for authorities, largely because they were still struggling to stitch together the fragmented timeline of the evening she disappeared. Detectives agonizingly debated whether the machine had been driven to an unexplainable, remote location under the cover of darkness, or if a trace of Nancy herself lay hidden within its upholstery. Uncovering such a grim artifact would violently wrench the entire trajectory of the investigation onto a terrifying new path. Yet, the federal agents were forced to confront a deeply frustrating alternative. The forensic sweep might yield absolutely nothing. In the realm of forensics, a complete absence of proof can sometimes speak just as loudly as a bloody fingerprint. In highly publicized mysteries, a dark cloud of public suspicion almost immediately swallows those nearest to the victim. A surgical, unyielding forensic examination possesses the power to either cement those dark whispers into undeniable fact or silently begin clearing a man's name. A stark reality these seasoned investigators understood perfectly. The outcome of this singular forensic sweep was positioned to become the undeniable turning point in the chilling mystery surrounding Nancy Guthrie. While crime scene technicians methodically dismantled the interior of the son-in-law's car, detectives waited in the shadows, desperate to unravel a web of deeply unsettling questions. The primary enigma centered around geography. Automobiles act as relentless traps for the environments they pass through, quietly hoarding microscopic grains of earth, road grit, and botanical debris. To the untrained eye, this debris means nothing, yet under the cold lens of a microscope, these isolated specks can map out a suspect's exact, hidden movements. Should this automobile have crossed paths with the dark site where Nancy vanished, those invisible geological fingerprints would finally break the case wide open. The second, and perhaps most macabre inquiry, revolved around the silent testimony of biological remnants. Genetic material possesses a haunting permanence within a confined space, lingering in the form of shed follicles, microscopic skin flakes, or the faintest phantom touch long after a violent act has concluded. Specialists scoured the porous upholstery, illuminated the interior latches, and swabbed every conceivable surface where a desperate hand might have grasped for leverage. Ultimately, the analytical gaze shifted to the most sinister compartment of any suspected transport, the rear cargo hold. In the grim theater of homicide investigations, this enclosed, lightless space frequently emerges as the undisputed focal point of the entire crime scene. Its value rarely lies in blatantly obvious horrors, but rather in its ability to securely trap the fleeting, residual echoes of whatever was hastily concealed within its walls. A damp piece of fabric, a hastily packed duffel bag, or something much darker being ferried through the dead of night. Authorities understood that if the shadow of Nancy Guthrie had crossed the threshold of that metal box for even a fraction of a second, the exhaustive scientific sweep was bound to extract its memory. Yet, lurking beneath their eager anticipation was a highly sobering, contradictory reality that detectives simply could not ignore. Should this exhaustive teardown yield nothing but ordinary dust, the prosecution's entire foundational narrative binding the son-in-law to this tragedy would begin to violently fracture. Consequently, the data extracted from this particular automotive autopsy wielded an almost terrifying degree of investigative power. It possessed the absolute capability to either lock the jaws of justice around a family member or severely blindside the task force, forcing them back into the dark to hunt a faceless phantom. Navigating deeper into their systematic dissection, the forensics team finally arrived at the notorious focal point that defines almost every clandestine disposal operation, the trunk. Historically, this unlit cavern functions as an uncompromising, voiceless diary, chronicling every unholy destination visited and every illicit cargo temporarily entombed within. It acts as an inescapable vacuum for synthetic threads, shedding particulate matter, and microscopic splinters bleeding off whatever secrets were hastily shoved inside. A transient piece of evidence requires merely a handful of seconds to shed its damning molecular signature onto the surrounding carpet. Recognizing this profound vulnerability, the crime scene unit approaches this specific compartment with the surgical reverence of dismantling an explosive device. The protocol mandates rigorous photographic documentation, first capturing the untouched geometry of the felt lining, the shadowy recesses of the spare tire well, and the deceptive side crevices where miniature horrors often slip away. Merely after this pristine visual preservation is complete do the technicians deploy their specialized adhesive stripping tape, systematically peeling invisible strands of potential guilt from the dark upholstery. They sweep the most vulnerable pockets using high-powered pneumatic extraction devices, equipped with hypersensitive filters engineered to trap the most elusive elemental specks. Every single captured anomaly is meticulously cataloged, sealed in tamper-proof vials, and expedited to the analysts. For the desperate men hunting for Nancy, this specific cargo hold held the key to an incredibly haunting riddle. Was a deeply sinister, out-of-place burden secretly ferried through the darkness within that confined metal cage? Regardless of whether a damning item had been scrubbed and discarded long ago, its ghostly imprint would persist, be it a synthetic sweater thread, a granular speck of foreign mud, or a splash of cellular fluid entirely hidden from human sight. To the seasoned homicide unit, this rear compartment symbolized their absolute strongest statistical probability of linking the mechanical asset directly to the grisly mechanics of the murder itself. Yet, an infinitely more frustrating reality lurked just beneath the surface of this exhaustive search. The cargo space could theoretically be completely sterile. Should that chilling lack of evidence materialize, it would abruptly author a profoundly different narrative for the entire investigation. In a psychological labyrinth, absolutely drowning in local rumors, a flawless, uncontaminated laboratory report possessed the unique power to definitively erase the primary suspect's name from the board. When the heavy doors of the impound garage finally slammed shut on the physical sweep, the truly crucial phase of this hunt was only just awakening: the sterile scrutiny of the science lab. Raw debris stripped from a suspect's floorboards is fundamentally mute. It offers absolutely no immediate confessions upon initial discovery. Every stray thread, every airborne speck, and every phantom cellular structure demands grueling, highly regulated microscopic cross-examination before it can whisper its dark secrets to the detectives. The myriad of swabbed and vacuumed anomalies pulled from the relative's sedan were heavily padlocked in custody chains and handed over to elite clinical scientists. Deep inside the fluorescent hum of the laboratory, experts initiated the painstaking process of cross-referencing this fresh molecular harvest against the morbid catalog of artifacts already belonging to the missing woman. This exact point of scientific intersection is the absolute heartbeat of any modern circumstantial prosecution. Should a solitary, microscopic weave from the passenger seat mathematically align with the victim's known wardrobe, the authorities instantly possess concrete proof that her presence haunted that vehicle. Likewise, discovering a unique, granular mineral composite that mirrors the topography of a suspected disposal site would definitively chart the automobile's ominous midnight trajectory. Furthermore, if the unmistakable genetic sequence of the victim herself materialized under the harsh lab lights, the terrifying implications would become utterly inescapable for the prime suspect. Conversely, the cold indifference of science can yield devastatingly neutral results. The gathered particulates might reveal absolutely zero correlation to the unfolding nightmare. Confronted with such an agonizing dead end, the investigative task force would be brutally forced to deconstruct their entire psychological profile of the crime. A total vacuum of incriminating trace elements would strongly hint that the horrifying fate that befell the missing woman transpired far away from the confines of that specific suspect's transportation. Ultimately, this agonizing wait for a sterile clinical report would serve as the singular, crushing fulcrum upon which the entire prosecution's case balanced. The impending laboratory results carried a gravity that extended far beyond standard detective work. They held the absolute power to either cement the dark cloud of suspicion hovering over Nancy's son-in-law or banish it into the ether completely. Deep within the sterile confines of the crime lab, technicians methodically processed the microscopic harvest pulled from the suspect vehicle. The entire trajectory of this agonizing mystery now rested on a singular, foundational concept of criminal forensics, the silent witness known as transfer evidence. In the clinical realm of crime scene analysis, this phenomenon dictates that every contact leaves a trace minuscule, fragments seamlessly traded between surfaces the moment they meet. A stray thread from a winter coat brushing against passenger upholstery, or a solitary strand of hair drifting down to rest upon a rubber floorboard. Even a microscopic speck of dirt, unique to a specific geographic locale, can hitch a ride on the sole of a boot and ultimately betray a driver's hidden route. While the naked eye remains oblivious to these phantom clues, under the unforgiving glare of a microscope, they weave an undeniable narrative of a person's secret movements and clandestine encounters. As the hunt for Nancy Guthrie intensified, forensic specialists scrutinized every solitary speck of debris extracted from the son-in-law's automobile. They meticulously cross-referenced this biological inventory against the baseline samples retrieved from the missing woman's residence and the immediate perimeter. The objective was agonizingly precise. Isolate a singular microscopic bridge, perhaps a solitary textile fiber mirroring her wardrobe. They hunted for botanical debris matching the flora outside her front door, or a rogue drop of DNA that would irrevocably lock Nancy inside that cabin during the critical window of her disappearance. A solitary confirmed match would shatter the silence of the investigation, triggering a seismic shift in the psychological landscape of the hunt. It would serve as undeniable scientific proof that the sedan was a direct participant in the dark machinery of Nancy's vanishing. Yet, the seasoned detectives bracing for the lab report knew they had to steel themselves for an entirely different reality, a complete and total dead end. Should the technicians confirm that the interior environment of the automobile was scientifically barren of her presence, authorities would be forced to dismantle their most compelling working theory, completely severing the son-in-law's transit logs from the tragic puzzle of Nancy Guthrie's fate. As the tedious alchemy of forensic science churned onward, the task force readied themselves to navigate two drastically opposing, high-stakes scenarios. The impending data drop was never going to be a mere footnote in a manila folder. It possessed the sheer force to completely rewrite the narrative of the crime. A positive identification linking the missing matriarch to that specific chassis would ignite an immediate and aggressive escalation. Interrogators would aggressively pivot toward motive and opportunity, demanding to know the exact mechanics of how her essence crossed the threshold of those car doors and probing the chilling prospect that a trusted family member had orchestrated her demise. Still, the seasoned minds running the war room harbored no illusions about the fragile nature of circumstantial assumptions. The microscopes could easily yield a pristine, thoroughly unhelpful void, an absence of stray threads, zero cellular fallout, and a complete lack of ecological markers tying the upholstery back to her final known coordinates. Such an outcome would drastically pivot the paradigm, silently confirming that the suspected automobile was a ghost ship, entirely disconnected from the sinister events of that fateful evening. Validating that innocence would effectively neutralize the most heavily scrutinized shadow hanging over the investigation. It is a cardinal rule of major homicide protocols. The inner circle always falls under the harshest, most unforgiving spotlight right out of the gate. This relentless scrutiny is rarely an immediate accusation of guilt, but rather a methodical necessity, clearing the familial underbrush before venturing out into the unknown dark. Consequently, the microscopic universe trapped within that vehicle bore a terrifying, monumental significance. It held the kinetic potential to either tighten the proverbial noose around the son-in-law's neck or conclusively exonerate him, compelling the task force to cast their net into far more distant, murky waters. With the steady hum of centrifuges echoing in the background, detectives braced for impact, acutely aware that they stood on the precipice of the most pivotal juncture in the entire hunt for the missing woman. The cold, hard mathematics of forensic biology possess a ruthless kind of magic, the ability to instantly vaporize human guesswork. Up to this suffocating climax, the whispering gallery surrounding the family's transportation had been fueled entirely by paranoia and open-ended queries. What dark secrets was that trunk hiding? Did its tires roll through the twilight hours when she was taken? And did the very fabric of its interior harbor the silent screams of her proximity? Yet, empirical science is the ultimate executioner of doubt, translating whispered hypotheticals into unshakable fact. Sequestered from the media circus, white-coated specialists methodically triaged the debris field pulled from the car, bathing each microscopic thread in high-intensity polarized light. Fragments of earth and ambient particulate matter were aggressively tested against the botanical fingerprints secured from the original crime scene. The faintest whispers of biological residue underwent rigorous genetic amplification, utilizing cutting-edge extraction methods designed to profile a solitary, sloughed-off skin cell shed in a fleeting moment of terror. Such uncompromising precision demands agonizing patience, often dragging excruciatingly slowly across days or even several bleak weeks. Scientific integrity requires exhaustive peer review before a single warrant can be drafted. Yet the investigative team understood that this impending dossier was the ultimate fulcrum upon which the entire case balanced. Should the final assay reveal even a molecular trace of the vanished matriarch within that cabin, the ramifications would hit like a shockwave, establishing an inescapable, chilling reality that the automobile was a silent witness to the exact timeline of her vanishing. It would immediately birth a new, far darker set of interrogations detailing the sinister logistics of that physical transfer. And inevitably, it would tighten a suffocating vice of police scrutiny around the son-in-law, tearing apart his every alibi during those final, fatal hours. Detectives would be forced to tear down and painstakingly rebuild the chronological sequence of events from scratch, mapping out the phantom trail of the automobile, tracing exactly who held the keys, and hunting for any stray traffic cameras or electronic pings that might corroborate its hidden journey. Yet, the authorities had to brace themselves for a far more frustrating scenario. The grim prospect that the forensic technicians would uncover absolutely nothing tying the missing woman to that machine. Not a single rogue thread, 0 drops of DNA, and an utter absence of geographic soil transfers pointing back to the targeted crime scenes. A profound void that would trigger an equally critical shift in the case. The entire suspicion, hovering like a dark cloud over the son-in-law's daily ride, would rapidly disintegrate. Science, after all, operates as a double-edged sword. It is wielded not only to snare the guilty, but to thoroughly exonerate the innocent. Should the interior yield a complete blank regarding Nancy or the items linked to her vanishing, the task force would have to radically reevaluate the automobile's significance, pivoting their intense scrutiny away from it and redirecting resources toward entirely new shadows, exploring alternate chronologies, and digging into the lives of strangers who might have intercepted her path during those fateful twilight hours. This deep psychological pressure underscored precisely why law enforcement felt the crushing gravity of the pending laboratory analysis. The technicians were not merely swabbing the upholstery of a family sedan. They were scrutinizing microscopic secrets holding the power to completely fracture the narrative, potentially sealing the fate of a prime family insider or decisively washing away the stain of public suspicion from a key figure. Yet, while the scientific cogs turned, a singular, haunting query hovered like a ghost over the entire precinct. What dark secrets had the Federal Bureau of Investigation truly unearthed from the depths of that cabin? Furthermore, what chilling truths would those findings broadcast regarding the evening Nancy Guthrie melted into the darkness? By the moment the crime scene unit finished dissecting her relative's automobile, that quiet, unassuming machine had silently transformed into the beating heart of the sprawling inquiry. This profound importance stemmed not from a machine's ability to confess, but from its insidious habit of trapping the microscopic whispers of a violent narrative. These are the invisible breadcrumbs perpetrators remain completely blind to: stray threads buried deep within the upholstery stitching, jagged grains of distinct earth mashed violently into the carpet, and cellular ghosts that stubbornly linger long after a killer assumes they have wiped the slate utterly clean. Such microscopic realities dictated the agonizingly slow and deliberate choreography the federal agents employed while processing the chassis. Every square inch was meticulously photographed, each panel rigorously swabbed, and the finest specks of dust vacuumed and securely packaged for the microscopes, knowing full well that when individuals vanish without a trace, automobiles frequently map out clandestine routes completely invisible to the naked eye, exposing off-grid destinations, documenting the hauling of illicit cargo, and proving beyond a doubt whether the ghost of the missing once occupied that confined, suffocating space. For the weary detectives assigned to hunt for Nancy Guthrie, stripping down the relative's ride was never a quest for a lone smoking gun. It was a brutal exercise in distillation, taking a labyrinth of infinite, chaotic scenarios, wild hypotheses, conflicting chronological maps, and a sprawling cast of characters who might have brushed shoulders with the doomed woman moments before her erasure. However, as cold, hard facts slowly bleed into the light, that overwhelming universe of suspects relentlessly shrinks. Some investigative avenues rot away entirely, while a select few solidify into terrifying clarity. The rigorous vehicular sweep was merely one gear in this unforgiving machine. If the sterile environment of the lab detected even a whisper of Nancy's essence within those doors, the authorities would instantly pivot, centering their entire chronological theory on that damning intersection. They would dissect the precise timestamps of the engine's ignition, mapping every mile of asphalt it devoured, and hunting down a constellation of security footage, cellular handshakes, or eyewitness testimonies that could lock down that sinister voyage. Such a breakthrough would violently alter the trajectory of the manhunt, pointing the compass directly at a specific target. Yet, seasoned investigators always brace for the silence, the very real chance that the sweeping of the car would yield an absolute, chilling void regarding their victim. Zero synthetic matches, an absence of genetic markers, and completely barren floorboards untouched by the soils of the suspected burial grounds. A negative result that would trigger a profound ripple effect of its own. The dark hypothesis anchoring the relative's transport to the crime would inevitably dissolve into the ether. After all, the laboratory is an impartial judge. Its findings do not merely unmask monsters, they serve to systematically clear the names of the accused. Lifting the heavy gaze of the law off one target frees up vital energy, forcefully turning the spotlight toward hidden figures, obscure geographies, and blind spots in the timeline that previously slipped through the cracks. This is the grueling, agonizing truth behind such intricate puzzles. Answers never materialize in a sudden flash of brilliance. They claw their way out of the dark, painstakingly, one fragmented artifact at a time. At this current hour, the vanishing of Nancy Guthrie persists as a haunting enigma that defies resolution. The task force stubbornly grinds on, scrutinizing thick scientific dossiers, untangling webs of electronic footprints, and chasing down any faint whisper that might finally illuminate the terror of those final, ticking moments before she ceased to exist. Buried somewhere deep within that mountain of collected data sleeps the terrible truth that the entire community is desperate to unearth. Did the sterile sweeps of the family member's automobile ultimately surrender the damning secret the task force had been hunting? Or will the breadcrumbs abruptly drag the detectives down a profoundly disturbing, unforeseen rabbit hole? Until clarity pierces the fog, the relentless pursuit marches forward, and with the unearthing of each microscopic clue, the authorities inch agonizingly closer to unmasking the cold-blooded reality of what truly transpired on the dark evening Nancy Guthrie faded away.